Hey there, welcome back to the Woodcrafting Place. Ray Ruthin here. So we've got a great project for you today. So let's grab our coffee and get to it. Today we're going to talk about basics of woodworking. So you decide to make a project around the house or take up woodworking as a hobby. So today it's Woodworking 101. We're going right back to the basics. We're going to talk about the things that you need to know to make a efficient project and make efficient use of the time in the shop. So we're going all the way back to the beginning. So here we go. Number one most important thing is you're going to need a plan, right? I know it's just a box or just a little doodad or widget or something, and you're like, why do I need a plan? I'll just nail some wood together and I'll be done. Well, when you're going to make your plan, going to get your materials, when you decide what you want to make it the right size. You want it to fit. So in planning, obviously, you need to know what you're going to make, right? So that's where you start, with a diagram or a sketch. And it doesn't have to be a fancy sketch, basic sketch, because that's where the material plan comes from. An example of a plan, a simple plan. I was asked, I don't see that very well, but I was asked by a restaurant. They had about 30 or 40 bowls they wanted to make. So I sat down, little sketch. Doesn't need to be anything fancy or anything really detailed. You don't need to have a computer-generated plan or sketch. If you can see here, it was about 3 inches by 9.5, 10 inches diameter. And as I laid out the wood, I realized that I could actually use a piece of the top of the bowl to make the bottom one. So I could actually reduce the materials I needed by 25%. Without the plan, I never would have recognized that. The next thing you're going to need to know as you're making up your plan, what do you want to make it out of? Wood? Probably if you're listening to this video, you're thinking of wood. So, and with wood, the number one thing you want to start is thickness. What's the basic thickness in the materials that you're going to use? If you're going to get your wood from a big box store, it's going to come a thickness. Something like a piece here, more or less 3/4 of an inch, nice little piece of maple. For most home projects, I actually recommend you do that. Stick with the big box materials. They all come pretty uniform, and you'll know where to start. If you're looking for something a little more exotic, you may find yourself going to a local wood mill. Typically, though, when you go to a wood mill, you're going to find the material is only smooth on one side. The other side is not planed. So this is not ready to be used yet, so you need to take that into account. So it's extremely important when you're planning your project, what are you going to make it out of? Stick with the big box wood. 3/4 of an inch is where it's all going to start. Because you'll need to know how you're laying out the parts, what size they're going to be, what width you're going to cut, and what length you're going to cut. The way you produce the parts, one by one, or in a group, is the thickness is always first. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to focus on the width. After the width of all your materials, or various widths are cut, the last thing you're going to cut is everything in the length. Obviously, there's going to be some joints involved. Your plan will include the joint design. Once you know how the wood fits together, like this, butted up against each other, lapped, it'll help you decide the final length. We'll do this in a short plan that we'll do after this. I'll show you basics of how to make that plan, how the diagram, very simple. We'll draw a simple box, how the parts go together. After you've done that, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to draw up a parts list. Now the parts list isn't an absolute requirement for a single project. You're just going to make one. Parts list helps, but it's not required. The last thing, the cut list, that's important because what you'll do with a cut list is you'll go to the store and you'll get your materials. You'll need to know how wide and how much of each part you're going to need. So let's start. I'm going to show you what a sketch looks like. We're going to talk about joints briefly. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube about joining. YouTube's great. I encourage you to go look around. We'll talk about the basics. Again, this is Woodworking 101. Your first project, maybe you don't remember what you learned back in 7th or 8th grade in middle school. It's alright, we'll walk you through it. And once you're done with that, you'll have the basics you need to make any project, big or small. But again, you always start with a plan. Once you have a plan, you need to know the thickness of your material. Once you know your thickness of your material, the joints, how it fits together, it'll show you how you assemble it, the size of the parts, and then last is the cut list, which gives you how much material you need. Do those things, you're going to have a great project. And of course, at the end, the last thing you want to give some thought to is how do you want to finish it? Because no project is finished until it's finished. Whether you want to paint it, clear coat on it, what have you. We'll touch briefly on that. There's a lot of videos, and I'll be doing some nice videos on finishing as well. But let's get going. Start doing our Woodworking 101 and get ready to make that box. Alright? So stay tuned. We're going to do that right now. Okay, so done with the plan, as I mentioned earlier in the video. So I've decided to build a small box. I've got a little box that I have over by the lathe. I used to carry sandpaper, waxes, and stuff that I use whenever I'm turning. So here we go. We made our little plan. Now the key is I decide what my parameters were to start with. In this case, the box need to have internal dimensions, inside dimensions, shown here. 12 inches inside by 4 wide by 4 deep. So now that I know what I'm starting with, I can design my box. So because I have internal requirements, I design out, starting from the inside and working out. And you can see all the dimensions we work through. Then we decide what we're going to have for components, what we have for a cut list, and any other materials. Planning all that out first does a couple things. Number one, minimizes your trips to the hardware store. And it also reduces waste. So it's funny that I mentioned that because I went into the wood pile, and lo and behold, we have ourselves a nice little piece of pine that I picked up on a previous trip. That's quite convenient, I might say. And I said, oh, it looks like about the right size. And I was tempted to just start cutting. But because I have my cut list showing the plan, I went and I laid out my material. So first I was going to cut one long piece, lay out all the pieces, and be done, right? Small problem. Wood's not long enough. I would have cut it all and realized I had half a board of waste. Not exactly half. The waste piece would have been just too narrow to produce the other sides. So I spent a little time and laid out my pieces. You can see the way I laid them out. Ends and tops. Excuse me, sides and ends. I labeled the tops. And labeled the outside. So as I make these pieces, I'll be able to keep them straight. But the problem I ran into, because the wood was a little narrow, I had to consider a design change. So I can do one of two things. I can go get more wood, but this is a utilitarian piece, so I have some flexibility on what I can do. The outside dimensions don't matter, all right? So I made a decision that if I change this one dimension right here, which is nothing but the recess for the bottom, that piece of wood's big enough. So had I not made the plan first and laid out my cut list first, decide where I need to cut the wood, I might have started to chop pieces out of board, gotten halfway through and realized don't have enough material. And guess what? We are off to the store. So I saved myself at least an hour in the project. And Guess what? Guess how long this took to make? Slightly less than an hour. So this plan is already paid for itself. And we're just starting. So now that we have our plan, I know what size to make everything. I have my wood, so I can start making. I can go off to the saw. As I mentioned earlier, this is finished thickness. Again, thickness, width, and length. I went to the big box store for this. Thickness was finished. So I'm good to go. Ready to do what's next? Of course, the width. So, and because I like to maximize my time, I'm going to set the saw and run all the widths at one time. So, alright, let's get over to the saw.